Hi there, Norman here. I wanted to make a video about exploring a potential language within you when you're doing note-taking, when you're trying to perceive something, or when you're trying to articulate specific perceptions or observations in your life. And you might think that there are certain limitations in your language. When I say limitations in your language, I mean things like your writing style, things like whether or not you are writing enough detail to provide context for the thing that you're writing about. And sometimes you might want to use the understandings and patterns of other languages and implement it into your own note-taking, patterns, or that when you're writing these things out and you already have a format, you already have a structure, you already have a thinking pattern, you want to look for specific efficiencies that can help you make multiple parallel thoughts when you are exploring something. And therein comes the point of having an internal graph language. I don't really have a proper word for this right now, but an internal graph language or an internal knowledge graph language is basically you're constructing your language of thinking that works best within your graph so that when you're making connections, when you're making links, etc., these help with complementing your thinking as you're writing these things out, kind of like a period or a comma or a colon. I'm sort of blanking out on what those are in the English language, but these are structures as you're writing things out that can help you think, okay, as I'm exploring this thought, I start to have parallels of something else. Can I introduce that in there? But maybe I don't have the right words for it at the moment, but let me implement a word from my internal graph language so that I can see if I can create some of that friction between two potential fields that you might want to write more on in a later time or for your future self, what have you. The best way to show an example of this, and this might be a good experiment for yourself, is to show my own. So let me just switch to my room. So one of the things about inventing your own and why is that sometimes when you're doing all sorts of free writing or freeform writing, let's just say that I'm writing and journaling about my time that happened today, and I started to recall something that has happened a long time ago. Remember in the previous video on principles, one of the most important points when trying to create your own principles of note-taking or perceiving anything is the ability to recall it. So the researchability of anything that comes in your way in terms of observing or perceiving, whether it's intentional or whether it's automatic. When you start writing things out, especially when in freeform writing, when you're writing a lot of filler words just to see if you can connect something, you start to see that there is some words that you will just glaze over. So things like this. And also things like this. So in this example, if I went to the park and I thought about life, kind of like reminds me, and the time when I went, and then insert detail of a memory which happened, you would really glaze over and not really pay attention to this. This isn't actually valuable to your graph. It's more so that these are words to help with, shall we say, priming yourself to go into the act of recalling a past memory, where this is the important part. So this is the important detail that I should be looking at instead. So when you're writing these things, all of a sudden you're writing a lot of words for something that just doesn't really come up of value. And this can come up in many different ways, especially in like a research context, or especially in when you're thinking about problem solving something, when you are thinking about something specific, and then you think to yourself, oh, why is it that when I think of this problem or this question and trying to answer it, it suddenly reminded me of someone mentioning a quote or a conversation I had 3 years ago, or an article that I brought up recently, or I wrote recently, or a Twitter thread, something like that. You start to see parallels, or you start to realize that these notes are triggers for anything else that you perceived, but you don't know how to make that connection. You don't know what materials should the bridge be made of in order for you to cross that. One way to introduce this is if you think that maybe that is useful, like if maybe the fact that I fell off the rock climbing wall and I cried is actually useful to this one block, maybe I can't work on it now, is maybe create your own custom, I'm trying to remember the word for it. Wait, give me a sec. There we go. I had to search for it because I don't know why I'm just blanking out right now. Punctuation, right? You have to create your own custom punctuation that logically makes sense in your head, so that when you go back to looking at your notes, you see this punctuation that only makes sense to you in this knowledge graph, and you start to think, oh, okay, when I see this application, I know what to do next. It's automatic. It's almost like breathing. It's almost like eating. When I see food on the plate, automatically my body will respond with some unmentioned questions like, am I hungry? Do I want to eat it? Do I know it's delicious? Yes, put it in my mouth. Things like that. So when you invent an internal learning language, you start to think of potential applications that can be shortened in the amount of time spent doing that application through, say, some acronyms, through, say, some semantic difference or analogies or definitions that are true to you, so that when you do want to write, you don't have to think so much about why is it that you're bringing something up, because you can just add that language noun or verb or whatever it is in, and that way you can start to expand upon there. So when inventing a language, you start to think about things like, what resonates with me the most? What are some visualizations that help with me putting this like image of this problem in my head? What am I trying to solve, etc.? Those are very logical, but they're very gray. They're very stale. So when you start to have learning languages or internal graph languages, that helps add with some contextualization on a more universal level within your graph. This is very, very convoluted and complicated, so I think best that I just go straight to the example. So I have with me my command index. If you want to know my command index, let me just bring this up. My command index is basically my little handbook of my inner principles, my outer principles, how I tag things, ways of different project management, etc. So we've covered this in another video, but this is essentially a stack of how I think or how I perceive the world, right? Internal graph language is a subset of your inner principles. So when you start thinking about things like when you observe something and you put it in and you're processing it, what are some tools within you using language, using linguistics, that can help you think better and think faster? So back to this. My in-graph language, I have perceived it to be some key applications that I feel are so common when I'm thinking about something in my knowledge graph that it's just way easier to summarize it in one piece. A very, very small example is that if you have a blog post that you're working on, or if you're writing, and you think to yourself, okay, I am currently writing this blog post, it's in draft phase, eventually I will get it completed. In my head, because of the thought mind, which I've explained in another video, I like to look at the analogy of a blacksmith as, blacksmiths of thoughts. That's what writers are essentially. So when I'm thinking about something, when I'm drafting something, I think of it in the realm of forging. I'm forging this post, and eventually, once it's done, it's completely forged. So this is a form of language. I'm borrowing the word forging and forged, the dictionary definition of it. I am applying it to anywhere, so that the next time when I'm thinking to myself, okay, writing a blog post about the way the world works. As soon as I see this block, I see forging. I know my past self has been thinking about this block, whatever this may be, and it is currently in progress. In the back of my head, when I pay attention to this block as I'm going through, all my notes, whatever, I stumble across this block and I think, okay, this is something that I have worked on, I am working on, and I don't have to pay attention to it now unless otherwise specified. Whereas when I write something like I have this blog post about a specific topic, and I know that it's forged, what that tells me instead is that whatever this block is, it's forged, it's complete, it's published, and somewhere or another out there, someone may stumble upon that post and may respond to it or react to it or interact with it. So not only does that tell me this block is completed, it also tells me that there is realm for further expansion and possibility, because there may be comments, there may be feedback, there may be agreements, disagreements, and this becomes then, in my head, a weapon that can be further refined. So that could be it. On a more universal level, if you take out that analogy aspect, this is something in progress, private, and then this is something that's public, that's available for anyone to look at. So that's an example of a language with application. We see that a lot in a lot of note-taking systems where something is in progress, it's in draft mode. Sure, that makes sense. But what if you want to have language that is only for yourself? So I have a few here. And I think this is when it gets a little bit crazy, so you can totally just skip this part if you want. I notice that when searching for things, when looking back at transcripts of my conversations with friends, with people in my network, etc., or the blog post that I write, I have a lot of common words that I use. So 1 would be parallel analogy, 2 would be comprise, 3 would be encompass, 4 would be fulfill, and 5 will be assumption. I write these so much that it actually gets tiring just to write that all the time. So instead, what I do is that I've shortened it to, in the realm of an in-graph language, a language only for myself, to very short forms of that sentence or that phrase. For example, if I'm thinking about water physics and I start to see, look at water and I see that a water drop hits a pond, it ripples, and I visualize in my head it ripples, and automatically in my head I'm thinking, this reminds me of when I'm looking at a video about earthquakes and the ground shakes, but then the ripples are a little bit different in material, but the effects are essentially the same. It's radius based, it's like a locus, it expands outward. So I would say parallel analogy, earthquakes and seeing fissures from the ground crack the earth. Now you might think that I could have just said, it in any of these other ways. I could have just been like, reminds me of earthquakes, or, that kind of looks like it, or this is quite similar to earthquakes in geology. Sure, that's fine. But in digital note-taking, efficiency is quite a big factor. When you want to write at the speed of thought, you want to have a language that catch-ups to you. What I mean by this is you want to reduce the time it takes to think about where to go next and trust yourself to go even further without care for cleanliness or messiness, etc. So you find shortcuts, things like these shortcuts, like these short form acronyms, etc. So you start to build this like little lexicon, a personal dictionary in your head about thinking. Whenever I see pal, I would think of this block is urging me or encouraging me to visualize in my head what the rest of this block entails. When I think of comprise, I would use CMP for CMP multiple topics, multiple phrases, multiple nouns, etc. So if I say polymathy is universal by nature, and I say comprise of, so now I don't have to spend a lot of filler word like typing energy. I don't have to do these highlighted parts for this block to serve its purpose. Immediately, I see this block, I see the child block, I see a function that I invented for myself, CMP, then I know that the function of this block is to tell me, okay, the following pages in this block are related to the parent block. Consider exploring them when you want to explore different angles. So I look at these, different pages, and then I add more blocks altogether underneath, or add more notes underneath. So you start to see that, or at least for me, I start to see that in the realm of my own vocabulary when thinking, I visualize and explore hierarchies by nature. I start to question the relationship between two entities. And it's not just when something is indented underneath a block. It's more so that, because if you think about it, Rome and many other outliners, for most outliners, when you have a block that's indented underneath another block, the screen is telling you that this is under the umbrella of the parent block. Sure. Sometimes I want to write in one block that a page or something else or another thought is encompassed by its preceding information, but without splitting it into different blocks. There could be many reasons for this. Like, for example, if I know that two pieces of information shouldn't be a parent-child block, because if it does, then the translation will be a little bit weird. So as an example, if I do, let's just do a copy of this. Okay, I'll replace the sentence here. If I want to use ENC, but I want to translate it here, then I'd say polymathy is universal by nature, and then extra detail, it envelops the entirety of thinking, blah, 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 add extra example here and there. But then instead of writing this entire thing, I can shorten it. I can say there. It tells me exactly the same thing, but in less words. So we say polymathy is universal by nature, encompasses thinking. I know that it has a prefix function, so the prefix, anything before it, will encompass thinking, or like the suffix. And then any child block is a child block of the entirety of the contents of this block with regards to any of the functions if any languages are applied. So now you're not questioning this specific sentence. you are questioning this entire block and its encompassing factors. You might think, oh, what's the point of doing that? Because why don't you just write it out? But this is what we tend to do when we want to play with problems in as many angles as possible. So framing it or reframing it differently can actually give you that little trigger to further explore different kinds of writing. And sometimes I can't be bothered to write all of that crap. I just want to write E and C and then go straight to the rest of the blocks just to like continue writing. So we start to see that these have a lot of functions. Fulfill is also another one. This is very specific to Rome, where we have to have a ref block right after it. So if I have a note here and it's to do with polymathy, and then I do FLFL, a paragraph from an article about polymathy from 6 years ago, then that means that by having this child block true, by having this parent block true, it fulfills the validity of this paragraph or this block that's referenced from far away to be correct or to be true or to be valid, etc. So these are some ways for you to hack that. And assumption is probably my favorite one because I do assumptions a lot. So even if it's something very obvious like, when you throw water over fire, water will put out the fire. So ASMP, water will always put out fire. And this is coming from a course that I took in university about perspectives of medical science. And let's just say that that wasn't really the most fascinating course, but I always remember one piece of advice or one piece of framing for anything that I want to test, in that we test out theories not to prove that it's true, but to prove that the theory is less wrong over time. So you get more confidence from knowing that this theory will always work. And the best, easiest example is water will always put out fire, but how do we know that tomorrow water will put out fire or water won't put out fire anymore, right? We just assume that it's true because it's been not wrong this entire time. I mean, of course, unless like physics just goes completely upside the head, but you never know, right? So that's been always on my mind, and I thought, how can I translate that understanding into knowledge graph work or knowledge work in function in general? Let's go back to this. This is another one. So here we have function tags. Function tags work a little bit different from vocab tags. Function tags actually have a greater emphasis on explicitly what should you do with this following block. I mentioned before that we have these filler words that are highlighted here. Instead of kind of like reminds me of, etc., I can use recall. So I went to the park and I thought about a life, and then I just typed recall in the very beginning, and then instead of making a very journalistic point of view or like a diary entry like writing style, I just say recall the time I fell off the rock climbing wall and cried. Like that's pretty much it. Like it's very, very simple. And normally we have a lot of features in any note-taking app that can help us with this, but sometimes writing it down specifically with intention really helps the future you when you're going back and reading on all these notes. Sometimes we get a little bit too dependent on ecosystem thinking when we're paging everything and block refing everything and making sure that these are really useful, or etc., etc., etc. But then if all I write is just, recall when this happens, or I wrote this blog post, it was inspired by a movie that I watched last week, or I reached this block and then I arrived from a tweet thread that I read 3 days ago. And sometimes these functions can also be things outside of your graph. If I'm reading this, and I think of when a water drop hits a pond, it ripples, I can say I can use Imagine to add this into my memory palace. So that's completely nothing to do with my note-taking app or principles, etc. But it's a function for me. I want to remember this block. The first thing I remember is a lake in front of Mount Fuji. I visited there years ago. It was a really nice picture, really nice view, and I thought I could connect it to this block. It becomes a marker. So markers are not part of any note-taking application, at least not to my knowledge at the moment. So there's no like memory palace centric note-taking app or tools for thought. But hey, I could be proven wrong in a few years. So we start to see that I've built a language on top of these universally understood dictionary definition words for specifically knowledge work. I've invented acronyms that work well for me because these are things I say, so I'm just shortening them down for efficiency. And sometimes I can even have an internal graph language for specific features, so like highlighting. Whenever I use highlighting in my graph, it can mean multiple things. Oh, let's see if I can actually. That's probably nicer to see. So if I were to highlight something, then these could be one of the potential uses or applications. It could be one of these few. So if I'm reading an article that I've pasted into my graph, and I'm using highlighting, and I put it there, then maybe some way or another, I may be highlighting for my future self to think, okay, I've highlighted this part. It was interesting to me. So let me search for relevant pages that contain similar phrases or nouns, and then I can explore in a different rabbit hole. And there could be a lack of confidence or reassurance. So let me highlight it, and then later on, if it does trigger again with like greater clarity, then I can explore it. Or I use it's a temptation for me to, or like it's a tempt or an encouragement for me to use the highlighting feature so that I can advance block ref a past note, because maybe I've seen this phrasing in my notes, but somebody else wrote it. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, is there a connection? And then that could be another angle that way. So all in all, this is a very complicated way of looking at things. This is probably not really applicable to a lot of people. But what lesson it can give is that you don't have to be bound by the limitations of your own language to find new ways of thinking or looking at something. If you try to explain to someone the impact or a vivid description of a painting, we normally start speaking in metaphors. Other than like, I don't know, Mona Lisa or something, which is very obvious what it is. It's a picture of a woman. But if it's something like a Jackson Pollock painting or another painting or something else that it's very hard for you to find words in your native language to describe what it is. You can only navigate around it. You can only navigate the feeling. You can only navigate your bodily experience. You can only navigate or express your embodiment. Then you start to see that, oh, the language that you hold right now is not enough for you to further articulate your intended message. There's translation happening from the inside of my head towards you. In this case, for my note-taking app, I'm trying to translate it out from myself right now, push it forward so that my future self can look at it and be like, okay, past me has tried his best to translate the following activities, potential actions, what he's discovered at the time, what he's thought, and through the commonality of our internal graph language, because there is a temporal element to it. And I think I will be doing another video on the relationship between time and note-taking another time. But my future self is now looking back and reflecting and self-introspecting on my current self's work and thinking, okay, he did a parallel analogy on this block, and now he's gone down this route. But now that I'm older, more mature, hopefully, then maybe I may choose a different analogy. Maybe this doesn't work anymore. Maybe there is something there, but it only took up until now or up until the future for me to arrive at the point where I feel satisfied with a specific rabbit hole. So that's an example. You start to open up doors for your future self to explore. It's like dungeon crawling, except that you find these new shortcuts, these secret passageways, and you're like, okay, let me mark this, and then I'll go away. And then future self can come back and be like, okay, I'm better prepared. Let's take a look at these passageways. But it's very hard to come across that experience again. So we try our best to write it out in front of us. Hence the mad writing, the free form writing, the letting it out over and over again, the general shame and conflict and sometimes even embarrassment of looking back at your past entries and thinking, what am I trying to write here, etc. But a graph language or an internal language should be very beneficial for anyone or any version of you on the stream of time of which you exist. So hopefully, if you do invent your own internal graph language, if you think that, for me, it would be, I'm not thinking, I'm mining for thoughts. If I'm still mining for thoughts 60 years later, I can now revert back to my thinking mode all the time. The modes of thinking and exploration stay as consistent as possible because we sort of live in averages, right? We try to default to a specific higher above average kind of performance and mode when we're thinking about something, especially when self-introspection, because it's a very sensitive thing. By having that commonality, time and with that irrelevance becomes less of a barrier and more of an opportunity. And with that in mind, you'd be able to create a graph that will be so universal that you can carry with you, even if you go elsewhere, even if your context and your environment are very, very different. I think that a graph language would really help you with reminding you that those bridges are still locked. Those bridges are still available for you to open. Those doors are still open. Because you can see the work, you can see the homework that your past self has done. And currently, if you're using it now, yeah, there's an application element to it. But in the future, I think your future self would thank you for inventing something that is so personal to you that you've enjoyed inventing. It's like creating your own toys that you can play with. So yeah, hopefully it's a very, very advanced way of looking at things. I was trying to mix linguistics and note-taking in there to a certain degree, but I hope you enjoy it. I hope it leaves with you something to think. Yeah. And if you are interested in any other note-taking related videos, I'll have a playlist somewhere on the screen for you to look at. But yeah, thank you.